Space, the ultimate symbol of the unknown, or some people see it as the future. There have been many missions in space that have happened or are planned for the future. Some were major success stories, and others total failures. Today, I want to dive into one of the most notable missions that took place, Apollo 17. Apollo 17 in itself was the last known mission done in NASA's Apollo program. Today we're going to learn more about it, how it was important, why it was important, and what it did to further the exploration of the realm of outer space, if you will.
Stage pushed. Engine arm is out. Okay, I'm going to get the pro. 99 proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. That's your grid.
T-minus 17. Final guidance release. We'll expect engine ignition at 8.9 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7. Ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition. 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff.
Roger, 1 Bravo. We're going 1 minute.
Houston, you are go for orbit. Go for orbit.
On December the 7th, 1972, Apollo 17 launched into space at exactly 11:33 p.m. CST. Prior missions to the moon had explored the moon's early volcanic history, but Apollo 17 was specially planned to collect ancient highland crustal material and search for young lunar volcanic activity to help further understand the moon's thermal evolution. During Apollo 16, 3 landing sites were considered for a future mission and were not fully considered, though, until this mission specifically.
These questions are best answered by the lunar module pilot for Apollo 17, Jack Schmitt, whose background as a geologist offers unique insight about studying the lunar terrain.
Now, mentioning that, it's important to mention to the crew of the mission, which included Eugene A. Cernan, who was the commander, Harrison H. Schmitt, the lunar module pilot, and Ronald E. Evans, was the command module pilot. Along with these guys were also the backup crew, John W. Young, Charles M. Duke Jr., and Stuart A. Rosa. Eugene especially, though, was a very accomplished astronaut before this mission. He was a lunar module pilot on Apollo 10. He piloted the Gemini mission with Commander Thomas P. Stanford on a 3-day flight in June 1966. He'd flown into space 3 times in his career as well, twice to the moon. He was the second American ever to walk in space, and was the last to leave his footprint on the lunar surface. Fun fact, he was also a captain in the U.S. Navy.
They would have one task before they got to work exploring.
Apollo 17 during its 12-day period was made up of 3 EVAs. Also, if you don't know, EVA stands for Extravehicular Activities, and/or spacewalks. The first EVA began 4 hours after landing and lasted 7 hours and 12 minutes. The crew deployed the lunar rover 180 meters west of the lunar module. They began doing a heat flow experiment, with experiments they had not yet been tested, but flew for the first time during Apollo 17. This also included a mass spectrometer to measure the composition of the tenuous lunar atmosphere, and an experiment to measure the sizes and velocities of micrometeorites. They made a short 3.3 kilometer round trip before heading back to the lunar module.
Oh man, go slow.
The second EVA was the longest of the Apollo program, both in duration and traverse distance, which was 7 hours and 37 minutes long and 7.6 kilometer distance from the module. It was also the most complex EVA based on a diversity of the geological targets. Sites they hit were broken up into stations though, so stations 2 and 3 they hit were located on a landslide at the base of South Mastiff, while stations 4 and 5 were on the valley floor while returning to the module. Station 4 specifically, though, was suspected of having a volcanic vent due to the dark halo surrounding the crater. Schmidt had also discovered orange soil, which turned out to be 3.6 billion-year-old pyroclastic glass from an ancient volcanic eruption.
I don't think that we've begun to see what the era of spaceflight really is. We've got a long way to go.
The third and final EVA lasted 7 hours and 15 minutes, made a 12-kilometer round trip. Station 6, when they reached the first step, was at an elevation 80 meters above the plains where they had landed. Although it was difficult to work on the 20-degree slope on the flank of the North Mastiff, the large boulder was split into several large pieces, totaling 25 meters across. The boulder was made up of a complex vesicular breccia, which varies in composition from one end of the boulder to the other. Station 9, though, was at Van Serg crater on the valley floor. Pre-mission, Van Serg was as thought to be a volcanic vent, but it turned out it was just a heavily impacted crater with a very rocky rim. So you see, Apollo 17's importance was to help understand the moon's history, how it became how it is now, but also see how every single crater and hole on the moon tells a story of a past event. But also, it is one of the most notable missions related to the moon or traveling to the moon, since NASA in recent times has focused more on other parts of space and learning about places like Mars, for example. But regardless, this mission is fascinating because of how it helped NASA learn about the geological makeup of the moon, and how evidence of its history helps understand these giant space rocks better, I guess. Anyways, that's Apollo 17, everybody. Thank you, and good night.